Today we're going to be painting this beautiful boat, painting bright colors with acrylic. We're going to be using a 1/2 inch flat wash brush. You can use several different sizes if you like, whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever's easy for you to control. As far as the colors I'm going to be using today, I've got titanium white, sky blue, brilliant green, purple lake, red, raw sienna, yellow, and I might need to add a little bit of black later if I need a little bit more contrast. So first I'm going to get a little bit of water on my brush, not a lot. This is a slick surface canvas, so too much water will turn your paint into soup. So I always want to load my brush at a 45-degree angle and thin the paint out on both sides. So you keep the paint at the end of the brush, keeping your bristles really fine and close together. You want to have a little bit of white. Try to pull from the side of your paint, not dip in top. That way you can keep your paint a little bit cleaner, longer. So I want to start with a light blue, and we want to start in the background sky. When you get to the edges, you want to paint around the edges. That way you can hang it straight on the wall, unless you're going to frame it. Now you can go around all these little lines, or you can cover them up. You should, unless it's really thick paint, you should be able to see the lines later to be able to paint those in. If not, you can look at your printout and see that about where you need to put those lines in. Now, if you want to go around them, you can. I like to see my brush strokes, so I don't want to over blend. And if you bought a kit with this pre-drawn from us at Chastain Studio, you're going to have it drawn with a water-soluble graphite, which means if you add water to these lines, they move. So usually, if you rub it a little bit harder, it will absorb into the paint and make your lines disappear. Like this. Just get rid of that little line. If you want to lighten it up more, just add some more white. And remember, with acrylic, it's going to dry pretty quick. So you've only got a few minutes to add white to lighten your tones. But acrylic is so forgiving. If you don't lighten it up before it dries, it's not a big deal. You just add in lighter color on top. I'm going to be adding another layer on top of the sky with some turquoise tones. Most paintings need several layers to really feel complete. They look better and better with more layers. That's for acrylic and also for oil. If you're using your own paint colors, your colors may look different or have a different name. Every paint brand has their own twist on colors, so all tones won't be the same. Don't worry about staying in the lines. Go over a line, it's not a big deal. Actually kind of adds to the interest. Don't forget that we've got windows in these boats so we can see behind them, or excuse me, see through them to the blue sky or the water back behind. So don't forget to color those in while you're doing the sky. paint there, so I'm going to smooth that out with some white. We can be a little bit more precise on other steps. Just getting the color on the canvas first is what's important. It doesn't have to be a thick layer, it can be a thin layer. You add to that as you go. Add to those layers with more layers. Now I'm going to let this guy dry just a little bit. It doesn't have to all the way dry, but I'm going to come in the background and on the top, I want to do a little bit of green and blue together. So I'm going to thin my green out and my blue. And we'll start layering some of that in the background. Now, if it gets too bright, too dark, add some white. Now down below in this area, we're going to have like a buttercream color. So I want to go all the way down with this. And if you don't like the green and you'd rather keep it more blue, that's fine. I just like the layered feel. I like to have, some turquoise or teal tones with blue. Just makes, it's got a good relationship in the paint, so it's nice together. If your paint brush is starting to grab a little bit and it's not moving easy, you may need to just clean it, reshape it, or just add a little bit of water to it so it can move a little smoother. Not too much water. If you add too much water on a second layer with a slick surface canvas, it can sometimes take that first layer of paint off and back down to the gesso of the canvas. But that's also good to know if you want to get rid of something. With acrylic, have a little bit of time, got a window of time that you can take away paint before it sets completely. kind of thinning out around those lines for the boats so I can still see them. Outside pocket. There's money in the legal. Need something else in here. I think there's any peanut butter. Maybe take some and hold on to some or parties. But take my Venmo card or take some cash. There's 5 cents. Don't do it because if you don't you cannot. Has Debbie Rowell come up?
Yes, she wrote me water. Text. It's going to have her email address and just say phone number. And that
You
was
tell her I was videoing you right now.
told her if you just send that to you, that you'll understand that that is send or the link.
Do you send mom the links of these? Would you like it when you go out? Okay. Bye, guys. Bye. That's a lot of green. Back off of that with a little blue and white. So I'm kind of doing an X and a T. Okay, so now I want to work in some of that buttercream color that's in the middle. To get that color, I'm going to use a little bit of white, a tiny bit of yellow, and neutralize it a little bit with raw sienna. So I'm going to pull some white over. Be careful if you've got your blue on your brush, this can turn to green if you're not careful. So this is an optional color. If you're not wanting to put that in, you don't have to, but it adds a little bit more movement in your background, a little bit more contrast. And, we're not sure if, if you want to have more of like an idea of a sunset, you can add more of this or change the color a little bit. But I want this to be soft. So I don't want it too overwhelming as far as the yellow tone. So that's why we're making more of a buttercream. So it can be translated, as sunset, sunrise, or just middle of the day. You have the ability to decide what time of day you want it to be, or if that doesn't matter at all. Important thing is that you get the colors on and it feels good to you. Working up into some of those turquoise tones, teal, blues. You know, this is very thin amounts of paint. If it's too thick, you're gonna have a sharp line where you stop the color, and we don't want it too sharp. We want it to just kind of fade away. So I'm just doing a light layer, thin, transparent layer of this color. Mix a little bit more. I mix a little tiny bit of paint at a time. I don't want to mix a lot. The more you mix paint, the more you become comfortable with it. But it teaches you a lot as you mix it. If you mix a whole bunch, your tones don't change. Things become a little bit flat. So it's nice to mix a little as you go. And you can see I've just got a little bit there. And I'm not covering everything. You can see some of that blue peeking out around. And once you add white to something, if it's a lot of white, it becomes opaque. So you don't want to cover your work underneath. So you're thinning that out a little bit with the other colors and just a little bit of water. You don't want it too thick. So if you want some bolder areas, you just kind of step back. It's good to step back about 5-10 feet. Look at what you're doing. See if you think it needs a little bit more somewhere and go ahead and do that. You can also do that at the very end. It's nice throughout the painting process though. Give yourself a little break, back up, look at it, kind of take it in, see if you need to do anything else. All right, for now, the sky's done, so we're gonna move. Okay, so now I'm gonna be working in these areas underneath the boat. And if you're looking at the printout, you've got dark, kind of a deep purpley blue underneath there. So I want to get some purple and a little bit of blue, run them together. Now you may not be able to get a dark enough color that you like. You can always grab a little bit of raw sienna if you have it, or a little bit of red to deepen that purple up. Maybe grab a little bit more blue. And remember, if you've got black on your palette, you can use that to deepen it up. What I want to do here is I just want to come in underneath these boats and add some shading. This one, I'm going to go up into the boat just a little bit, thinning that paint out. And go ahead and do a couple of lines. Maybe go ahead and outline the windows a little bit. And I'm not taking my time too much with this, just kind of roughing in color. Rough the color in. Go on that next boat in the water. And some shadows down there. Remember, I'm mixing just a little bit at a time because these tones, they change, and that adds interest. See, I'm going over the lines a little bit, and it's okay because remember, this type of painting is more expressionism or impressionism. So you want strokes of color, the impression that you're getting from the scene through color, and that expressing through brushstroke. It's nice to see the brushstroke. You don't really want to cover or blend too much so you cover up all those beautiful brushstrokes. On the second boat here, we've got some dark areas on the, it's painted the front of the bow here. I'll darken up some of that. Don't have a lot of purple up above that, so I'm just going to kind of stop there. Maybe do a little bit of a line here, drive it up some. On the next one, we're going to fill in. So that purple, you can see the purple is different. And that's because I'm mixing a little bit at a time. If I wanted this purple to be a little bit more of a violet, magenta purple, I would add a little bit more red. But I like it to change a little bit. This is more of a periwinkle. And we like that. Some tone difference. Outline these windows a little bit too, give it some you can use a smaller brush if you feel more comfortable, but sometimes the bigger brushes don't allow us to take too much time. Sometimes we overwork things, we overthink it. So the bigger brushes kind of force us to work with what we've got. And you get strokes that you wouldn't get otherwise. Go ahead and fill in this side. I'm covering up those buoys. We can always put the buoys back in at the end. Just kind of roughing in a little bit more shading here. I'm going to move to the far left boat. Need that purple, kind of periwinkle purple. And we're going to outline our windows. You can use your finger, kind of smudge it in, or a blender brush, a Q-tip, or a cotton ball, or an old makeup brush. Want it a little bit softer. You can add a little bit of water to kind of smooth it out, make it a little bit lighter. Just going to add in a little bit shading there. Use a little bit. Go ahead and put in this line. Try to keep it straight, but again, remember, we don't want a whole bunch of straight lines on this. We want to build it up with color. Now, in the original printout, these are yellow. I can come back and do that. I'll give a hint to where the color is. Maybe you want to put a little bit darker areas up here. So a lot of this will be covered with another color. But it's nice to do the underpainting. So I want to work down a little bit more in the water. And I'm going to lighten up this purple. Add a little bit of white to it. And if it's not blending in because that area is already dry, you can get just a little bit of water, mix in a little bit more of that dark purple. You need it to be darker. And maybe you want to wipe your brush. Instead of wiping all that paint off, you can come down here and just wipe your brush in a few areas in the water. Try to be really sporadic with this. You don't want it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You want to really move around and just have a few areas that have a little bit of that reflected shadow or shading down below. So as we're painting the boats, we use the color of the boats and every now and then hit down below in the water so that carried color is the reflection. And then we'll fill the rest of the water in with our blue tones. All right, so I like to work dark to light. It's probably the best way to paint, unless you're doing watercolor. We want to build our layers. So the next darkest color is my raw sienna. So we can finish all the wood out on the boats at the end, or we can kind of do it as we go. I like to do it as we go, so I'm going to add some raw sienna. The wood color down at the bottom of our first boat on the left. I'm going to come up to these lines here. That would be the rails on the boat. And maybe I want to use a little bit of this along the lines at the top. I'll go ahead and add more on the other boats with this color. Outline the windows a little bit on this one. So you don't want to do the same thing on every boat. You want them to have their own personality. Just don't overuse the brown. Looks like cross lines, don't forget those. Of course, I'm going to come back and put like turquoise over top of that brown. Just want to get in some of these tones. Okay, move to the next one. So this is underpainting, really important. Contrast and value in your painting, build on top. So go ahead and use some of that raw sienna with a little bit of white for these areas on the bow. Just get a little bit of white coming over and adding that color in here. If you want it more brown, you can actually add a little bit of purple to it and darken it up. Now, as far as the white goes, if you want it lighter, you can add white now, but white does tend to be the weakest of the colors, so it's very manipulative. With darker colors, it's going to just chew up your white, just kind of consume it. So you might want to wait if you want this brighter, let it start drying a little bit, and then you come back and add the white in. So in these areas that's don't have wet paint, I can go ahead and add white on top, white in between the windows. But you see it's not very bright, so if I want it brighter, I'll have to come back, and that's a little dry and add it in. Which is good. 2 layers would be nice on it. Now, I don't want to go too far on this boat because I need to bring them kind of all up together. And remember, we want to use a little bit of this color and put in the water down below. So we've got a little reflection of those sienna, raw sienna tones. And go back to a little bit darker if we want. With a little bit less white. Okay, so I want to keep that brown in my water kind of concentrated under this boat, the most of it. It's like we've still got a little bit of brown underneath some of these other ones, so you can add a little bit of reflection near the bottom, but it's not going to be high up on the boat. It's basically at the base. So if you do it high up, that would extend your reflections down further. If it's lower on the boat, it's only going to come down a short way on this reflection. Now that also depends on where you are when you take a picture or you're sketching or you're painting in real life. That does change depending on your angle. Okay, so on this last one, we're adding some brown tones. That raw sienna, just a little bit. We've got some here. And I've used raw sienna on almost all of these. I don't want to use it on this one so much, except for the main hole or post. Maybe cover that in a little bit. Okay, I clean my brush. I want to go back to my first boat, and I want to start dropping in the colors and the areas they need to be in. So first you've got yellow. That's a bright yellow. You might want to calm it down with a little bit of white. And that's area's blue, so we'll skip above that to this yellow. You want it brighter, grab in brighter yellow. Now, as I'm doing that, I want to come down below, touch in a little bit of yellow, thin it out some with white. So it's got a lot of color to put down in below, but we'll get to it. Going back to the boat, putting on top here. And a little bit of yellow back behind. I'll outline those windows with some white. Just going to add some yellow and white. So we can come back and do brighter strokes of white. So my strokes are a little bit thicker here with the yellow. I like that. Let's see. I'm going to brighten this up above. So we need some more yellow in my brush, kind of thicker stroke. And I want to put some yellow in above. That middle area is blue, kind of like the sky. So I'm going to use a little bit of blue and white. To cover up that buoy. Well, you can go around the buoy if you feel comfortable. Or if it's kind of a pain, just cover it and you can paint it back in. So be careful with your blue next to that wet yellow because it will turn to green. We need a little bit more blue up here. And while I've got that, I'll brush. These are short little strokes. You don't want them more than like an inch, inch and a half long. That shows the movement of the water. Texture, ripples. All right, so we can come back in with white and start popping color in these later. I'm gonna go ahead and do these buoys. If you covered the buoys, come back and do the buoys when the paint's dry. I'm gonna use some blue and purple. And just gonna do a little round buoy. I'm gonna wait for that to dry before I do the white stripes. But with that color, I want a little bit of that reflection down below. So you'll start to see our boats kind of carry and they're kind of drifting towards us with the reflection. Okay. If you need any more of that color anywhere, go ahead and touch that in. Clean my brush and I'm going to move on to our next boat that is more of a turquoise tone. So I want to use green and blue. A bit more on the green side. It's a nice color. Around the windows. And that color is going to be low, way down low. And we want to carry that color below, a little bit heavier underneath. And then we're going to space it out. So the heavy saturated color here is going to reflect heavier here, then it's going to give some space for all of this. And then we've got that color again. So I want to, you can actually measure with your hand to see if you're kind of on, like I'd measure 1, 2, 3, or 4 fingers up to see where that color would start again. So going down, and that's a good distance. Start again. Those purple and turquoise and raw sienna colors really look good together. So I'm going to smooth some of that out. So you can always come back in and put more strokes on top to break up the color some. We can come back with some purple or blue or white or whatever. So there we go. So I want to do some of that color up above. add a little bit more blue up here. Now I'm going to add some white to this turquoise to make it a little bit lighter. And we're going to put that in here in the center. Oops, too far. Straight over. We've got an outline of yellow above this. So yellow's not always the strongest color, depending on if it's a cadmium, it is. If it's like a primary yellow, like a mixer yellow, sometimes it doesn't have as much power to cover. Its opacity is not there. So if you mix a little white with it, it does become more opaque. Cleaning my brush off, add a little bit more water. I want to go ahead and grab that yellow. Let's see if we can get our area outlined here. Get it bright enough. And at the base. All right, before we go too far, that light color I used with a stripe in the middle, that turquoise with a little bit of white. Just going to get some of that color and bring it down. And you're probably going to have that color in a lot of places because we use some of that similar colors in the sky. So that's going to be kind of a fill-in color. So if you want to take just a second and start putting in a little bit more work down in the water, you can add some more white. And again, you want to mix just a little bit of a paint color at a time on a painting like this because you want your tones in the water to change. So I'm doing strokes side to side with this brush. Instead of wide, I'm going a little bit thinner. Can do the wide. Right. It's important that we paint water horizontal instead of vertical strokes. That way it looks more like water. Okay, so clean my brush off, grab some white, and come back in and let's try to finish out the majority of this boat. If we need to come back in, we can. Yeah, so this white is very strong compared to the other colors. But while I've got it, I'm just going to go back to the bow of this one, adding white. So definitely going to need to come back in with that white. And we've got some white reflections on the boat itself. Come in here and kind of touch in some white spots there. Go ahead and go around these windows. At the top on this one, we were working on grabbing that white again, putting some strokes and some highlights up top, maybe some highlights above these windows. And if you can't get enough of that white to cover, this is like a second layer on this white, you can always come back and do a third layer. So instead of wasting that paint, remember, just kind of touch down below in the water. Cleaning my brush off, moving to the third boat. So we're gonna work with some light blue. So I need some blue and white, or light blue. And we want the base. Flow on the boat. So I'm gonna come in before we go to the other boat and put some more darks in here. We've got some dark green. So green and raw sienna. Put in a little bit more darker tones. So that's pushed it too far in to see it like a that raw sienna and green. And I pushed it into like an olive tone. So I want it to go back a little bit more to that darker turquoise. So I'm going to mix some green and some blue, maybe a touch of sienna. Like I said, we'll come back with some white to do the highlights. And we've got the buoys left to do. Move on to our pink boat. So we need 3 shades of pink. We want to start with a darker pink, so just a little bit of white with red to get the darkest pink. You can always add back a little bit more red if it's too light. I'm going to add more white to that pink to get it lighter. A little bit of pink on that sienna, that center hole there. So the pink down here has actually a little bit of purple with it, so it's more of a magenta. Add some purple and red. I don't want to forget, I need to touch these colors in down below, maybe carry a few of those over. Remember, you want to concentrate the darker at the base. Go back to that first dark pink that you made and add some, maybe a couple over. And add more white so you get the light pink. So I also want to go up here and add white. I haven't really cleaned my brush, so it's got a little pink in it. Just some over here. I clean my brush off all the way and get some more white, pink on there. That white coming down through here. Some of these strokes might be a little bit thicker with paint. Got some darker purples I want to put in there, but before I do that, I'm back over here with white. And add some white. Let's go. Let's go to the next one. Now this buoy over here, I can go ahead and put some stripes on it. Go back to these purple stripes, a little bit of blue and a little bit of purple. That deep color. On these to give it a little bit more depth. Get some of that purple down into the water. Maybe a little bit of raw sienna, shadows, give some more depth. Okay, let's do the buoys. We've got yellow on this buoy. And this one. And we've got orange. So mix a little bit of red with a little bit of yellow. So you get an orangey light. Now remember, we've got reflection on the water from the buoys also. So I've got that orange. It's not in a lot of places, but a little bit here and there. Back up to where these buoys are, but it's some yellow reflection. We'll come back and put the white stripes on the buoys. After we're finished with the water. Right, so we've got buoys here on this one that are kind of a deeper blue. It's a little bit of blue and purple. Okay, now we're going to move down to the water. Down in this water, we want to fill in a lot of this with blue and white. We'll make it a light blue. Be careful which colors you touch, because it can turn different colors. Okay, so I put a little black on my palette. So I can go in here and get a little bit more depth. Use a little bit of black with raw sienna first. I don't want it too dark, but I do need a little bit of depth. So you can do a little bit finer lines now. You want to have a little bit more detail. Now's the time to go in there and take your time with your lines. Maybe at the base, drop the shadow in. You need to outline the boats a little bit to get more of the separation. So this just kind of weighs them down a little bit, setting them in the water. And a little bit more definition to different areas of the boats. you want it heavier in any place, I just grab straight black if you like. Come down and add it where you feel like it needs darkest. Okay, so you can continue to add more and more. If you needed more white for highlights, now would be the time to go ahead and come in and put some of those in. You've got more highlights on the windows or around the windows. Still building up layers. We're about at 10. Painting. If you need to add some white down in the bottom, I would do that now. It's best to do that when everything else is dry or close to it, so you can get the bright white without being tainted by another color. So knowing when to say when is important. You don't want to overdo it, but you don't want to underdo it either. So I'm gonna stop there. Thank you.